Before we get into today's episode, I just want to thank our sponsor, Novo. They're not a bank, but they're a fintech company. They've been helping me kind of get my shit together when it comes to banking, invoicing, and even just planning for the future, right? Actually having money saved for future projects, taxes, employees, and things like that. It's completely free to sign up. And also, if you are looking for funding, once you're a customer for 6 months, you get access to that funding, which is really exciting. So if you're looking to get organized in your business, you're looking to actually save versus spend all of your hard-earned money, I would highly recommend you sign up for them. I have a link in the description for you to sign up in our YouTube and in the show notes for the podcast. Now let's get into today's episode. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Corporate Quitter. This is another mini episode with me, just solo. And this is kind of a two-parter. So we're going to talk about how to break patterns from corporate so you don't replicate the same ones when you work on your business, but also what to expect when you finally find clarity. Because I find that I've been talking to people about these two things, right? A lot of the sort of issues that we have with being lost and not having clarity dials back to our patterns, which originate from corporate, which if we even go even deeper than that, some of those patterns originate from childhood and our school system, right? Depending on where you grew up, the sort of things you were taught and all of that. Some of these things are very deeply rooted, not just from the corporate environment. So what to expect when you finally find clarity is something that I think everyone as a business owner is seeking, right? Especially when you quit, if you were like me, where you just quit based on instinct of like, I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know I'm supposed to be doing something different. I have a tidbit, a little bit of an idea of what I want to be doing, what lights me up, what excites me, the topics I want to talk about, all that. But I'm kind of like all over the fucking place. I don't really know what to do. I don't know what the thing is, right? The viral video, the idea, the concept that creates money. Like I have no fucking idea. And that could be really, really stressful, especially as you go through your journey, right? So you think you're just going to have the idea and it's going to kind of be that like theme or that thing for the rest of your journey. And oftentimes it pivots a lot. And I should know because I've been in this for 3 years and it's changed quite a bit. Even though at my core, right, Corporate Quitter and the mission and values that are behind Corporate Quitter have always been there, right? Quitting the system and kind of pursuing freedom in all forms, not just in corporate, but just in life in general. But that doesn't mean things haven't deviated, right? So the same is going to happen for you. So when you find clarity, finally, there are some things you need to be aware of so that you're not privy to burnout, which is one of the biggest things that'll happen once you have clarity. So Dan Coe, if you don't know, he's a massive creator, YouTuber, newsletter writer, all of that stuff. He's been around for quite a while. I think he's an author now. He has these 4 phases of creativity, which I think is amazing. It's a great way to realize and kind of understand, number one, like when the lost phase is going to come again, right? So it's not so unexpected, but also what to expect when you finally find clarity and then you keep moving through that. So basically the 4 phases of creativity is lost. That's the starting phase. The next is clarity. The third one is intensity, and the fourth one is consistency. So just to paint a picture of these phases really quickly. So lost, it's pretty obvious, right? There's a lot of things, a lot of darts you're throwing at the wall, but you're not really finding the mark, right? You haven't quite unlocked it yet. And the lost phase is also known as your experimental phase. You're essentially going out into the world and trying to find out what the thing is, right? So you're doing this, you're trying that, you're going here, you're meeting new friends, you're doing all these different things to try to find an outcome of what the next step is, which is clarity, right? So finally you've made your mark, or at least enough of a mark, right? Enough clarity so that you can start moving forward, whether it's in creating content, building a product, having conversations, having set goals, even knowing where the fuck you're going sometimes can be really important. You may know like the 5-year plan. For me specifically, I have a lot of issues with the short-term plan because things change so quickly as a business owner, not just in your mental aspect of like, oh, I don't have to wait for a boss to approve processes that take 6 months to a year, right? You can literally change on a dime what you're doing and how you're doing things. But also just your ideas and patterns. And as an intuitive being like I am and like many of you are, I won't have any idea what I'm doing or how I'm doing it or why I'm doing it. And then all of a sudden, flip of a switch, right? That moment happens where you're like, you're supposed to build this business plan or do this thing and then you go down sort of what I call a side quest to uncover if that's the right thing. If it is the right thing, right, you have that moment of clarity and you run with it. And so what ends up happening is you move into that next phase, which is intensity, where like, you're like, oh my God, I have the idea. We're running into, oh my God, we finally have it. We're doing it. And so you just like word vomit. Or at least that's what I do. I word vomit, right? Write the newsletters, do the podcast episodes, all of that stuff, post on LinkedIn, do the videos while I still have that idea and I'm cultivating it to confirm, to validate if that's the right idea to go with, which then leads into the next phase, which is consistency, which is right, building out the routines. It's like every single week, right? My podcast, they release on Thursdays, the newsletter's on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I repost the newsletter that I did the week before on LinkedIn. Like I have all these new processes in place based on this newfound level of clarity and intensity to back up the consistency. Now, in doing all this, there's no guarantee the timeline of each phase, right? Because sometimes they're longer than others. But right now I'm in the phase of intensity/consistency, which is why I'm doing a lot more. We're creating more products and all that stuff. Now, when you go through all 4 phases of creativity, it can happen in corporate and also can happen outside of corporate. But just knowing that those 4 are there can really help when you have anxiety about the future and about like what you're doing right now. So the thing too is like when you have clarity, even though you might have the idea of what you're doing, that doesn't take away the anxiety that you feel or like this insatiable need to fucking fulfill it, right? You're like, okay, I'll just chug the coffee and do the thing. And like you almost become manic. And that leads into my next aspect, which is breaking patterns from corporate, right? So a lot of the things that I've seen in my conversations with clients and quitters alike is that basically end up repeating exactly the same patterns we did in corporate in our businesses because we didn't take the time to process them and sort of regulate our nervous systems and do an audit and have a conversation with ourselves of like, is this actually something that I like doing or is this something society has thrown on me because it's all I know, right? So for example, one of the things that I am privy to is burnout, right? Basically working myself to exhaustion. Because in my mind, basically what ends up happening, like many of us, is we associate being exhausted as being productive, right? Good human, good person. You did the thing. And there's a lot of other things that, kind of are associated with that, right? So not having time associates to productivity, right? Good human. Being stressed out, good human. Like all these, they're obviously negative things, right? They're not good things. So one of the things is for every single pattern in corporate, a lot of the people pleasing tendencies, you're positioning towards burnout and it being a good thing versus a bad thing. And also just this idea that productivity is the end all be all is something that needs to be purged almost immediately. Now, a couple episodes ago, I want to say it was December of 2023, I talked about the quitter hangover. So for those of you who are looking to quit or are already in that process, you've laid out the quitter exit plan sort of thing, your quit plan is ready to go. You need to listen to the quitter hangover episode because one of the things I didn't do, or I did a little bit, but I didn't understand fully what to do, is you're going to have a hangover period where everything that you believed in, everything that you thought was one way comes crashing down when you quit, right? So you have this sort of hangover, much like an alcohol-induced hangover where you need to rest, recover, all of that stuff. So the breaking the patterns from corporate will start to happen when that quitter hangover happens. And that can last a month to, 6 months. I mean, for every person it's different. My experience was 2.5 months for me to actually like rest and then kick into gear and start working on things again. But for one of my clients, it was 3 months. Another of my clients was 6 months. So it can really vary. And it also depends on how you're going about this. If you're like white knuckling it versus just like practicing letting go and seeing what happens, which obviously will vary also based on your financial situation, like the economic state of the world, war, like there are a lot of things that can trigger this to not happen so quickly or eloquently, right? Because sometimes it's a shit show. But so coming back to breaking patterns from corporate, again, being aware of the quitter hangover, being aware that there's a transitionary period that happens where almost like the astrology girlies call it the tower moment where everything comes crashing down is a very real thing. But when it actually comes to breaking the patterns, it's going to be different for every single person what those patterns specifically are. But some of the ways that you can actually break through them, right? And this goes for everything, not just, my positioning of like how I perceive work, but even how you deal with money, because that's going to be different when you're a business owner. It's even going to be different in how you approach friends, because as a business owner, you're going to have to make new friends, unfortunately, but fortunately. So there's a lot of things that are going to change. But number one, the first thing is you got to identify the triggers, right? So that's the hardest thing. But as they say in like AA, basically like you have to identify the problem before you actually go and fix it. So you want to identify what the patterns are, right? What the problems are. And then you have to identify the triggers. So something has to trigger a habit, and a cue can be absolutely anything. It can be a comment from your mom. It can be, someone unfollowing you. It can be the money in your bank account draining down, right? Your savings going down. There are a ton of different things, right? There's also a lot of mental and physiological triggers that will happen. If you're coming from a background of corporate, you probably have people pleasing tendencies, you have all of those things. So there's going to be a lot of societal pressures, which is more mental than it is physical. Be aware of that. Identify the cues. And if you need to, get a piece of paper, write down all the things that you think you have not broken through. And the next thing is to disrupt that pattern. So once you know the cue, you can throw bad habits off and track it. That's a little harder than it is said to be done, just because like when you're in the moment and you're heated and you're doing the thing, right? Okay, you're working past 5 p.m. even though you said you weren't going to do that, or you're skipping through lunch even though you said you weren't going to do that. It's hard to do, but if you just recognize it and try every so often, just disrupt it in small ways, right? You don't have to this week alone just drop everything and completely stop. There's flexibility, right? So I, in the beginning, was more rigid with my schedule because that's how I knew that was my routine in corporate. Okay, I'm going to work from 9 to 5. It was really easy for me to transition to that same mentality. And then I knew after 5, I wasn't going to work. Nowadays, I've been in this for 3 years. I know my highest level of creativity is usually from 7 to 12 p.m. I take a lunch break, I chill for a little bit. If I can, I'll wait until 3, 4 p.m. because that's a lull for me. And then I basically pick up at the end of the day from 4 to 6. I'll do a little bit more work, but then I'm going to the gym, exercising, eating, wrapping up my day, and that's that. Now, that doesn't account for like rogue days where essentially I have events or I'm seeing friends or I'm not working at all that day. I did what I need to do first thing in the morning, right? Posted on the stories or did this or whatever else, but I basically have a different day. So I can't really disrupt, right? I can't change the trigger to a habit essentially if my routine is a little bit different, right? So that the cues and the things that initially were triggers for me, right, working past 5 p.m. no longer apply to me unless I myself now recognize, oh, okay, mentally I'm not feeling good, body's not feeling good, a lot of negative chatter, like I'm looking at my phone a lot, I'm scrolling a lot, I'm comparing a lot. Like those to me are triggers now versus actual physical routine sort of things, you know? So it will depend. But again, that goes to my next thing of replacing, right? So the thing is, when you first merge from corporate into business, I very much recommend that you keep a lot of the same routines and patterns just to see if you like it, right? You have to ease the ship as it kind of goes into this new dock essentially, or you're off on this new voyage. Maybe that's a better analogy. So anything you can do to make it less volatile or less sort of crazy is great. Don't change the way you eat. Don't change the way you work. Don't change the way you sleep. Unless these things are negatively impacting you, then change them, right? And that's where you replace them. So again, if we're looking at a 3-year time frame of me doing business, when I first started, I had to stick within my routine, the 9 to 5. Then my second year, I went fully rogue, just didn't do shit at any point in time on a certain schedule because I fully wanted to test out when my energy levels were high, when I felt the best, when I made the best content, all of that stuff. And I was able to audit it, right? And replace it as needed. And now again, here we are 3 years later, changing it again. So the thing is, it's not like set and done, but it is something that we need to continually audit to see, hey, is this triggering some bad habit within me? Do I not feel good? Has something changed in my business? Has something changed in my world? Like those are things to be aware of. The last thing really is to keep it really fucking simple, guys. Like I think all of us come from a corporate, which is like super complex and everything has a process and a process and and like it's fucking horseshit, okay? Keep it really, really fucking simple, okay? There's no need to only take calls from, 12 to 3 p.m. on Tuesdays and Wednesdays because that's what the experts say. And then you have a great, connection with someone and they want to meet on a Friday, but you don't take meetings on Friday. Like, I don't know. And that's a really shitty example, but just everything down from your routine to the way you do things through content. Like, I would say even if the societal pressures on how to build routine are stressing you out, go by intuition. We all see them online, the people who say like, oh, wake up at 4 a.m. and I go to the gym and then I make a hearty breakfast and I meditate. That has never fucking worked for me. Even when I was in corporate, it never worked for who? For men? Like, no, I know there are men listeners, that no offense to you, but we have different hormonal cycles from you. So every single day it's going to look a little bit different. But I know even from my men that I talk to, they don't do that shit. And the people who do that shit a lot of times, like you end up finding out, I don't know, they fake it or they're just saying that because it sounds good or all of this stuff. Like there is no right or wrong with this, which is also sort of a hard thing when you are a rule follower, right? Especially in corporate when people tell you what to do and what procedures to take and all that. So it's really hard to transition into a new world where essentially like all hell breaks loose, right? All rain, you could do whatever the fuck you want. But the thing is, like, you don't have to go by anyone's playbook. You don't have to listen to me either, right? What I'm saying is going against your gut, and I'm not talking about your internal like chatterbox who's like not wanting you to be uncomfortable. I'm talking about if there's a disalignment with something that I'm saying that you're like, actually right now in this present moment, this doesn't feel like the right thing for me. That's totally fine. You shouldn't have one person you look up to. You should have multiple people you look up to and multiple sources with where you find your best routine, habits, food, behaviors, people you connect with, all of this shit. Everything should be differentiated and checked routinely because, again, like I said in the third one, you should be replacing your habits and shit often because the thing is you're going to change, right? So as you change and evolve and grow and become this new version of yourself, right? The person who is in corporate's day and habits are going to look very fucking different from an entrepreneur, let alone an entrepreneur in different like brackets of pay, brackets of influence, followers, brackets of just like overall goals in life, right? So basically, this is not a one and done, but it is something that you need to expect when you quit your job. And for quitters out there who are on your path, if you're not doing it on a quarterly basis, try to do it every 6 months or so to like do a fucking audit and say like what's working or what's not. That's also why I love like full moon cycles. Whether you're an astrology girly or not doesn't really matter. It's just, for me, it's just a system that works for me. I'm like, okay, every new moon, right? Because there's a new moon and a full moon every single month. So that gives me a 30-day window, which is perfect. So every new moon, I know to go into my like Zen place and essentially doing an audit and say, what do I want to create in terms of habits, goals, conversations, things like that. And then the next aspect, right, when the full moon comes around, I then do an audit on the previous 30 days from that new moon and say, oh, did I live up to that? Did we reestablish a new routine? Is that theme still coming up? Am I still triggered by that person, that habit, that sort of negative experience I had with someone, right? So you don't have to go by the moon cycle. That's just one that I really like. You can just literally do it the first of every month. You just go back. I just like to do the moon stuff because I'm a woo-woo bitch. But pick and choose. If you need an outside source to help keep you on track or in a sort of box, if you will. I don't want to say box because we don't like being in the boxes, but right, you got to see what works for you. So once upon a time, I did what they did in corporate, which is like, okay, plan your year goals in January and all that stuff. And I still do that, but it's my own version of that. I'll kind of wrap this up with saying that breaking patterns from corporate and kind of like dealing with those moments of being lost and then finally finding clarity can be really fucking difficult. These are not things that happen immediately. There's a massive transition between all of this, right? From being a corporate employee to an employer, because that's what you are when you're a business owner, whether you actually employ people or not yet, you're an employer. But then also going from loss to the clarity, there is a massive transition period before you actually even have it, or when you have it to then actually go and do something with it, right? So all of these things can be impacted by your corporate experience, or again, like I said in the beginning, your childhood experience. If you're still struggling and the rational is not working, right, in terms of like identifying the cues and change this and do that, like go full force and be fucking weird with it, okay? There's a great thing that I use called REST. It's RREST. I have a practitioner that I'm in contact with. It's one singular session. They get really raw and real, and they can go right back to your childhood and previous experiences, right down to what they call the most original moment or the most original concept, where that sort of belief was sort of started that then triggered and kind of fell into all these other areas. Anytime I'm in like a repetitive habit that I've had for quite a while and I can't break, I will return to that. I haven't done a session in about 8 months, but I was supposed to do one a week ago. I had to reschedule, but I will be doing it again because there are some themes around sales and money and business and authority and all these other things that are coming up, which I'll probably write about at some point. But if something isn't working with what you're currently doing, you got to take it a different direction. And sometimes those things are whack and weird. You guys know, if you've been around for a while, I've done a lot of whack and weird shit, from stripping down to nothing and running around in New York City to actually, you know what? Look back into 2022 and watch those episodes, because there's a lot that happened before I quit my job to allow me to be where I am today, and has made me the person I am based on confidence, abilities, skills, and understanding on an internal level. That again, I had to do weird stuff like taking mushrooms and whatever else. Not advocating for self-harm, bad behaviors, or even taking any sort of medicine, we'll call it, right? Any sort of herbals or things like that. But I think there's a method to it because a lot of people, after having some frustration, find clarity in some of these more lucrative things. But I'll leave it at that. I hope you guys have a great, great week. I might actually bring in another episode this week just because something happened in my financials that I think I really want to share with y'all. So it happened to really impact people online on my stories on Instagram. So I'll probably create an episode around that too, because that is a touchy, it is a hot point here. That's a major component that comes up when leaving of like, how do I pay for my shit and what do I do and what's the difference and all that. So I'll talk about that probably in another episode. But anyway, have a great rest of your week and I'll talk to you guys soon.